In 2014, with global warming reaching its limit, scientists developed a new formula called CW7. This is a compound designed to reduce the average temperature of the planet when released into the atmosphere. However, the results of the experiment were catastrophic and the temperature dropped dramatically, creating another ice age. Several species of fauna and flora became extinct, leaving only a few human beings, who survive inside a train called the Snowpiercer. 17 years after this event, the survivors have been divided into castes. The richest live in the front wagons, full of luxury and comfort, while the humblest are forced to inhabit the last levels, where food, water and sanitation are scarce. One night, during a routine inspection, the security guards order the residents of the rear wagons to kneel down to do the count. But one of them, Curtis, refuses to sit down because he's checking how many soldiers are protecting the other levels of the train. But at the insistence of his friend Edgar, he kneels before the soldiers, who ask which of the passengers can play the violin. An elderly couple come forward, but the soldier says he only needs one to entertain the passengers in the front cars. The violinist refuses to go without his wife, so as punishment, the guard attacks the woman and takes the gentleman away against his will. Curtis and Edgar are disgusted by such cowardice, but it's not yet time to take revenge and they just take their food, a protein bar for each passenger. One of them, however, contains a capsule sent by an unknown informant. It ends up being given to young Tim, who promises to hand over the bar if he can play for at least an hour with the ball made of rags. Curtis accepts the deal and as soon as he picks up the bar, he finds the capsule with a message that reads Namgung Minsu. This is the name of the security expert who can help Curtis with his plan, but he is being held for having disobeyed orders and for using a compound called chronal. Curtis then plans to free him, so that he can get to the front wagon and eliminate Mr. Wilford, the owner of the Snowpiercer. If all goes well, Gilliam, the leader of the rear wagon, will take his place and they will finally have the chance of a better life. While Curtis finishes preparing the plan, the soldiers return to the wagon and call the youngest for a health check. With everyone gathered, the inspector, Claude, begins to inspect them, but soon she notices the presence of Tim, who is hiding under his mother Tanya's clothes. Tanya tries to protect the boy, but the soldiers attack her and take the boy away. After that, the inspector chooses Andy, but Andrew, his father, doesn't want to let him go, and as well as confronting the soldiers, he throws his shoe at Claude's head. As punishment, the security guards attach his arm to an opening in the train, so that in 7 minutes he is completely frozen. In the meantime, Mason, the train's minister, appears and gives a speech scolding the passengers and telling them to stay in the car to which they have been assigned. After that, the minister asks Wilford himself to say a few words over the radio, but no one answers. Then, as 7 minutes pass, the guards remove Andrew's frozen arm and, with a huge sledgehammer, smash it to pieces in one fell swoop. At that moment, Gilliam appears in front of everyone, showing that he has also lost his arms and legs. On seeing him, one of the soldiers points his gun at the old man, but the minister stops him, saying it's no use shooting. Gilliam then tells them to help Andrew, and warns Mason that he will soon speak to Wilford personally. Seeing that it's past time to put the plan into practice, Curtis sends Edgar and other passengers to load barrels of metal to set up a battering ram, and thus break the blockade between the wagons. At the same time, he trades a portion of chronal to one of the passengers, as it will be useful in his plan. The days pass, and in one of the counts, Curtis tells Gilliam of his suspicions that the soldiers have no bullets in their guns because of what Minister Mason said about it being useless to shoot. Gilliam believes it's risky to confront them without knowing for sure, but there's no more time to lose. Another day passes and Curtis, along with the other passengers, prepare the battering ram, but are surprised by a surprise count. With no time to hide it, the passengers gather in front of the battering ram, just in time for the soldiers to appear. Then the countdown begins and Curtis knows that when everyone is on their knees, the soldiers will discover the plan and everything will be over. In the midst of his desperation, Curtis decides to check that the weapons are indeed unloaded. He then advances towards one of the soldiers, points the gun at his own head, and when the guy pulls the trigger, nothing happens. Certain that the weapons are unloaded, the passengers start a riot and use the battering ram to stop the doors from closing. The passage is now clear, so Curtis and Edgar, along with the rest of the group, set off to attack the soldiers with all their might. However, at the last door, a brutish guard is swinging an iron weight all over the place in an attempt to keep the passengers away. To his misfortune, Gilliam calls in Gray, one of his assistants, who quickly jumps on top of the guard and strikes him with his blade. With this victory, it's time to look for security specialist Namgung, who is trapped in a morgue-like closet. Edgar frees him and the guy, who doesn't understand English, asks for a portable translator so they can talk. After hearing the whole plan, Namgung initially refuses to help, so one of the boys in the wagon, called Chan, takes his box of matches, but the guy punches Edgar, causing a ruckus. Curtis helps his friend and catches Namgung in the closet, but the guy reveals that he was only trying to take the key so he could free his daughter Yona. After freeing her, Namgung says he'll help them as long as they give him 2 doses of chronal for every wagon they cross. With no choice, Curtis accepts the terms and Namgung makes a hotwire to open the first wagon. Before the gates open, Yona says that the passage is safe, as there is no one on the other side, and to everyone's surprise, her prediction proves true. Arriving in the second carriage, the passengers see the world through the window for the first time in years. Unfortunately, everything is still covered in snow, making the planet uninhabitable. Soon after, Namgung opens another door and Yona again says it's safe because there's only one person on the other side. Her prediction once again proves accurate and the group meets Paul, a former member of the rear wagons who has been taken to prepare the protein bars. Curtis tries to convince him to join them, but the guy has had his sanity compromised by the isolation and prefers to continue making the bars. Then one of the passengers, known as the painter, is startled to see what the bars are made of. Curious about this, Curtis also goes to look inside the machine, and to his horror, he discovers that they are all made from crushed insects. In order not to traumatize his companions, he keeps this a secret, but confronts Paul about why he is doing this. The guy, however, has only been following orders, and reveals that he put the capsules with the messages in the bars at the request of someone unknown. The last one has water written on it, indicating that the group should go to the most important section of the train, the water supply. Minutes later, everyone is waiting for Namgung to open the next door, but this one proves to be more difficult than the previous ones. Meanwhile, Curtis asks Yona if she is psychic, since all her deductions about what was on the other side of the door have proved true. The girl, who was born on the train, can't explain, but decides to test her ability once again. But as she does so, she shows an expression of horror and tells her father not to open the gates, but it's too late, and on the other side, a group of executioners, armed with axes and spears, are waiting for them. To intimidate the passengers, one of them takes a fish, cuts it with his axe and stains the blade with blood. Despite being outnumbered, Curtis, Edgar and the rest of the group are undeterred and set out to confront them, starting a terrible battle. The executioners destroy the passengers with their sharp axes, but they also face difficulties throughout the battle. Curtis manages to take the weapon from one of them and, one by one, eliminates everyone who crosses his path. However, he doesn't realize that the fish has been thrown to the ground, and as he steps on it, Curtis slips. The executioner then prepares to finish him off, but Edgar jumps on his opponent and knocks him down, giving Curtis the chance to eliminate his enemy. The fight continues, until the commander of the executioners warns that the Ekaterina Bridge is approaching. The train always passes over it when a year is up and all the executioners celebrate, but this time the tracks are covered in ice floes. The impact knocks the passengers off balance and the Snowpiercer narrowly misses being derailed. Fortunately, the train manages to continue on its way and everyone prepares to resume the fight, but Minister Mason reappears and makes yet another speech, calling the passengers ungrateful. In response, Curtis throws an axe at the woman, but she is protected by one of the guards, who blocks the attack with his sledgehammer. Faced with this attitude, the minister announces that she is going to enjoy her moment of fun, then puts on her binoculars. Following her command, the surviving executioners put night vision goggles on their masks, which leaves Curtis confused. However, when he sees this, Namgung warns him that all the passengers are doomed, because just beyond the Ekaterina Bridge there is a huge tunnel. As he feared, as soon as the train crosses the passageway, all the lights go out and the passengers can't see. Faced with this advantage, the executioners take advantage of their night vision goggles and launch an attack with no chance of escape. Amidst the chaos, Curtis remembers Chan, who moments before had taken Namgoong's matchbox. He summons the boy to help them, and Chan, along with Gray, Andrew and other passengers, light several torches and set off to illuminate the wagon. Thanks to this help, the passengers regain the upper hand and Gray uses his agility to capture the commander of the executioners. He threatens to eliminate him if Mason doesn't order her men to surrender, but the minister doesn't care and orders the fight to continue. As a result, Gray eliminates the commander and throws a knife at the minister, hitting her in the leg. As the woman tries to walk towards the exit, Curtis takes off after her, but when he looks the other way, he sees that the guard with the sledgehammer has captured Edgar. Torn between stopping the villain or helping his companion, Curtis chooses to follow the minister, leaving Edgar to be eliminated by the guard. Overcome with guilt, he manages to overpower Mason and forces her to order all the executioners to cease their attack. She then tells them all to surrender, but the guard with the sledgehammer refuses and tries to run away. At that moment, Yona steps on a spear to lift it towards the guard, causing him to fall on top of it and have his body hit. Seeing this scene, another guard called Franco the Elder becomes enraged, but is forced to retreat, along with the other executioners. With the battle over, the group sets off to interrogate Mason, but she promises to help them find the owner of the train, provided they spare her life. Curtis accepts the terms, but when night comes, Gilliam informs him that there are few surviving passengers left. He fears that going through the wagons will only lead to more casualties, so Curtis proposes taking a small group, while the others wait for his call. The leader agrees to the idea and Curtis chooses each of his group, taking the minister along as a prisoner. As they move on, the group comes across two more wagons, one similar to a greenhouse, where crops are grown to harvest food, and one in the shape of an aquarium, which is used to preserve aquatic species. In this aquarium, there is a restaurant serving sushi and the group has the opportunity to try this dish for the first time. However, when it's Mason's turn, Curtis forces her to eat one of the protein bars, so that she can get a taste of what it's like to live in the back wagons. After the meal, they head to the next car, which resembles a kindergarten, where the students are taught by their teacher to respect Mr. Wilford. She tells them that when the CW7 was launched into the atmosphere, Wilford deduced what would happen and created the train to save humanity. However, 15 years ago, 7 passengers created a revolt and tried to escape from the train, but ended up freezing because of the temperature. The teacher uses this story to keep the children in line and convinces them never to try to leave or revolt against Mr. Wilford. She then calls the violinist from the rear carriage to play the children a song. Shortly afterwards, another man appears with a trolley containing freshly boiled eggs and hands them out to everyone. Curtis also receives one of the eggs, and inside he finds another capsule with the message blood. Suddenly, the teacher pulls out a gun from inside the egg cart and starts shooting at the passengers, hitting Andrew, who loses his life instantly. The other guy with the cart also grabs a gun, and when he reaches the carriage where Gilliam and the other passengers are, he starts shooting at everyone. Chaos breaks out on the train, but at that moment, Gray uses one of his knives and throws it at the teacher, hitting her right in the neck. Unfortunately, on the TV in the nursery, the camera shows the guard Franco pulling Gilliam's body, and without hesitation he shoots him in the head. Curtis is shocked to see this, but Tanya soon brings him back to his senses and tells him that he must be the new leader of the group. Curtis accepts this responsibility, but before proceeding, he takes one of the guns and shoots Mason, as he believes she has given them away. After that, the group moves on, finding more luxurious carriages that look nothing like the back of the train. Meanwhile, Franco arrives in the nursery car and sees the group of passengers passing the train through the window. Without hesitation, he grabs his gun and shoots in Yona's direction, to avenge his companion, who was eliminated by the girl. Luckily, Yona manages to dodge the shots and Curtis quickly aims his gun at the guy. The two shoot at each other until they run out of ammunition, but seeing that he won't be able to hit his opponent at this distance, the guard reloads his gun and goes in search of the invaders. Finally, he reaches the sauna-shaped carriage, along with 2 other soldiers. They search for the invading passengers, but Franco loses patience and starts shooting at the cabins, eliminating innocent people. One of the soldiers revolts, but the guard shoots him too and sets off in search of the invaders. Gray appears behind Franco and plunges a knife into the villain's shoulder, starting a fight between the two. However, despite his agility, Gray receives a counterattack from the guard, who knocks him to the ground, leaving him unconscious. Curtis then appears with his gun and waits for his opponent to appear, but the guy manages to dodge the shots and hits Curtis in the arm. Seeing this, Tanya sets out with a machete to help her friend, but the guard finishes her off with 1 shot. Even so, she manages to distract the villain long enough for Curtis to attack him and the two exchange punches, but the guard again gets the better of him and knocks him unconscious. Franco then removes the knife from his shoulder and prepares to eliminate Curtis, but Gray puts his hand on the blade to protect him. The fighter then attacks the guard one more time, but the villain manages to break his arm and pushes his knife hand straight into his heart. With almost the entire group eliminated, the guard goes in search of Yona to take his revenge. However, when he opens one of the cabins, he comes across Namgung, who sets out to confront him using a crowbar. While he's trying to eliminate the guard, Yona takes Tanya's machete to finish him off, but her father doesn't allow her to attack him. Instead, he makes her drop the blade, with Curtis waking up at the same moment and hitting the guard with the machete, who is finally defeated. The group was once again victorious, but the price of victory was too high. Now, with only Curtis, Namgung and Yona left, they continue on their way and find a wagon similar to a nightclub, where the specialist picks up a fur coat for his daughter to keep warm. Further on, they finally find the train's machine system, and in front of them is the door that leads to Wilford's room. On seeing it, Curtis loses control and tries to open it anyway, but when Namgung tries to stop him, the two get into a fight. The fight doesn't last long, as Namgung manages to knock Curtis out, and to try and calm him down, he hands him his last cigarette. As he regains control, Curtis vents and tells the tragic story of when he was sent to the rear carriage. There was no food for the passengers, so they were forced to feed on the weakest. One night, Curtis pointed his knife at a woman with her baby and eliminated her, but to stop him from doing the same to the child, Gilliam offered his arm to feed him. The baby was Edgar, and it was then that Curtis realized what he had become. To redeem himself, he started working with Gilliam and raised Edgar, who saw him as a brother to look up to, without suspecting that he was the person who had eliminated his mother. After telling the whole story, Curtis asks Namgung to open the door, but he refuses because he really wants to open the door off the train. He believes it is possible to survive, because over the years, he has seen that a plain below the Yekaterina Bridge is less and less covered in snow. This indicates that the planet's temperature is rising and there is a chance of repopulating the Earth. Curtis thinks that all this is just Namgung hallucinating because of the chronal, but the guy claims that he didn't take the substance just for consumption. He then begins to gather them all into a uniform mass and tells him that chronal is highly flammable. All it takes is one spark to blow the door off and get off the train, but before he can do that, Claude appears with a gun and shoots Namgung. She then informs him that Wilford himself wants to speak to Curtis alone and calls him into his office. As he enters, he finally meets the owner of the train, who congratulates him on having made it through all the wagons. Curtis can't contain his anger at the man who caused all this, but he says it was necessary to keep control of the population. Not only that, but all the uprisings on the train were engineered by him, including this latest one, led by Curtis. Curtis doesn't believe the story, but to prove his point, the owner of the train calls one of his henchmen, who is in the rear carriage, and orders him to eliminate most of them, in order to maintain the ideal number of passengers. Disillusioned after discovering the sad truth, Curtis just sits at the table, not knowing what to do. But on the other side of the room, Yona, who had been unconscious due to the use of chronal, wakes up, and seeing her father injured, she tries to help him. However, they both come across the guys who were in the nightclub carriage, who set out to attack them both. Namgung tries to stop them, while teaching his daughter how to open the door to Wilford's room. Meanwhile, the subject calls Curtis to look at something on his train, and in front of the two of them is his core called the Eternal Machine. Finally, Wilford reveals that he was the one who sent the messages in the capsules, and that together with Gilliam, he had chosen Curtis to be the new owner of the train. He tries to convince him that the machine now represents the world and he must take control of it in order to preserve humanity. Just then, Yona finally manages to open the door and Claude tries to intervene, but the girl attacks her from behind with a bottle, knocking her unconscious. However, things only get worse when Franco shows up, having survived the confrontation in the sauna. The girl despairs, and taking Claude's gun, she tries to shoot the guy, but misses the target. Afterwards, Franco runs towards Namgung, who tries to fight him off and tells Yona to get the matchbox from Curtis. The girl runs up to him and asks for his help, but Curtis, taken aback by Wilford's words, refuses. Yona then picks up the fork from the table and uses it to remove a piece of the floor, showing yet another tragic truth that Wilford is trying to hide. Looking through the opening, Curtis finds Tim in the gear compartment and being used to operate the train, as only children can fit through that opening. This terrible sight makes Curtis come to his senses, and as well as attacking Wilford, he hands the matchbox to Yona. He then uses his arm to block one of the train's gears, allowing Tim to escape, but the force of the gear presses down on his arm until it is removed. At the same time, Namgung manages to defeat Franco, eliminating him for good. With that, Yona uses the match to light the chronal's wick and her father sends her into Wilford's room, but when he tries to close the door to protect them inside, the mechanism doesn't work. Seeing that they will be hit by the impact of the explosion, Namgung and Curtis hug Tim and Yona to protect them. The chronal then explodes and its wave of energy generates a huge avalanche, which knocks most of the wagons down the mountain, while the front part manages to escape by going through the tunnel. The train finally stops, with Yona and Tim still alive, but Namgung and Curtis were unable to withstand the explosion. With no other choice, the girl runs out of the train, wearing the fur coat her father gave her, and realizes that despite the low temperature, it is possible to survive on Earth. Amidst all the snow that surrounds them, Yona and Tim see a polar bear in the distance, walking among the mountains. Contrary to what they had imagined, there is still life on the planet, and along with it, there is hope that humanity will be able to inhabit the Earth again one day. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.